Edwards, is that fair? Don't we at least need to hold open the possibility that someone is unjustly accused?
So, burden of proof applies when there's a criminal case where you have the potential to lose your life and your liberty. This is a job interview. This is, a circumstance where I think that accusers are speaking up, and if men began to have a conversation with their wives and their girlfriends and their friends, they are going to find out a lot about what they've experienced, and I think that's the moment that we're in. And so when you're talking about standard of proof, burden of proof, I think if we were in the middle of a court proceeding, absolutely, it's the highest standard possible because what's lost, but we're not, and the standard for a judicial nomination always has to be the truth, the whole truth, and the nothing but the truth.
Let me just finish, because there was a moment in the hearing that seemed to come straight out of the movies, and I want to play this, and then I'm going to bring you in, Brett.
I welcome whatever the committee wants to do, because I'm telling the truth.
I want to know what you want to do.
I'm telling the truth.
I want to know what you want to do, Judge.
I'm innocent. I'm innocent of this charge.
Brett, have we reached the point at which, for all practical purposes, that the burden of proof has shifted from the woman who accuses to the man who's accused?
That's what's essentially being argued here, and I hear it echoed in what Congresswoman Edwards just said. This idea that it is only in a court of law in a criminal case of some kind, or a legal case, that you're innocent until proven guilty is far more deeply embedded in our nation and our culture and as an ordinary sense of fairness. And to have another standard would mean that someone out of the blue with an accusation, under certain circumstances, you're guilty until proven innocent. That is manifestly unfair. It means that unverified allegations can be used to ruin your reputation and damage your life forever without verification. It is absolutely impossible to think that we as a nation are going to go there. And yet, remember, 3 members of the committee, the Judiciary Committee, and Minority Leader Schumer all said there's no presumption of innocence. That is where we are. That is where we seem to be going, and I hope and trust the public won't stand for it.
Mo, put aside the politics, put aside the specifics of this case. Can you imagine anything more frightening than being unjustly, unfairly accused of doing something you didn't do?
Other than being the victim of something like this, which would probably be more frightening. Look, I am going to try to take us out of the politics, because this question is playing itself out in corporate boardrooms, in newsrooms, in all sorts of other venues outside of politics across our country. And it is complicated, and it is hard. I'm a guy, and I'm a dad of a son, and I don't want to be accused, and I don't want my son to be falsely accused. I also have a daughter, and if, God forbid, she was ever in this situation, I want her to be heard, and I want her to be believed. And so this is really a cultural battle that is emerging in a way that I have not, Britt and I were talking about in the green room earlier. This is probably one of the most divisive cultural issues we have faced, and that has polarized us as a nation as far as I can remember. I believe that the women ought to be heard, and when these charges come up and these accusations come up and these questions come up in corporate boardrooms, in newsrooms, in other venues, whether it's political or not, I think they need to be looked at, they need to be investigated, the women need to be treated absolutely seriously, and the accused needs to be treated fairly.
Do we have to be fair to both the accuser
Of course we do.
and the accused?
You
got 30 seconds.
In any situation, this is not about like just a courtroom, okay? Due process is at the center of our entire civil society. If you don't have it, and in any of those, the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt, or at least a preponderance of evidence, we are talking about evidence-free claims. Whether this is a case of an employment dispute, it doesn't have to be in the courtroom. If we lose that, everyone's son out there is at risk.
All right. We could go on. We will go on. Thank you, panel. See you next Sunday. Up next.